So I want to start with a sort of spiritual truism that I've picked up along the way that I still have trouble accepting. It's quite brief. It's just this: life is hard. Life is hard. Just as simple and as hard as that. In this reflection, I'm going to talk about my journey as a son to a mother that has chronic pain and chronic fatigue and has dealt with that throughout her life. I got her permission to talk about it. Thank you, Mom. And I wanted to just take a moment here, just as people feel comfortable sharing. I would invite you to raise your hand if you have dealt with chronic pain or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, or you're connected to someone deeply who has dealt with any of those issues. I see you. These are topics we don't normally talk about, and I just want to acknowledge all of the folks in the room who are dealing with those. So for as long as I can remember, growing up, my mom had chronic fatigue and chronic pain. It would show up as back pain, usually when I was younger. She would always be taking rests in the afternoon or the late morning. And even as a young child, looking at other adults in my life, friends' parents, friends' moms, and even my dad, I realized that my mom was dealing with something really difficult. Even from a young age, I could understand that. And when you're a kid, you kind of just accept what's going on in your world. And I was so bonded with my mom that in many ways I was kind of along for the ride with her. And what I mean by that is, my mom, she searched high and low, far and wide for a remedy, a therapy, a modality, a treatment, all the way from Western medicine to totally woo. Anything to make this work, anything to make this better. And some of these attempts, they would bear fruit for a while, and there would be a sense of hope, like, okay, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is what it was that's going to make it better. And eventually the pain and the fatigue would crawl back in, and we would sort of, get back to a baseline. And I just recall in that time that as a young child, my response to it in a lot of ways was to try and stabilize the situation or try and fix it or try and come up with a solution. And of course, I was not in any position to do any of those things, really. I guess I could stabilize to the best of my ability, but that ended up generating a bit of, frustrated energy within me, right? This sense of, just frustration, and also a sense of kind of not knowing what to believe. Chronic fatigue and chronic pain they're just unpredictable. And so it's hard to kind of get that bearing and that grounding, but I tried, I wanted to. But I never felt any resentment about it, because I knew that my mom was giving me everything that she had. Every ounce of energy that she had to give, she gave to me and my siblings as a parent. And even at a young age, I understood that had to be enough, even when it was a really difficult situation. If I could kind of sum up the sentiment I think that I felt, growing up with all of it, it would be this: why can't this be easier? Just why can't this be easier for her? Why can't this be easier for me? Just why can't this be easier? And then almost kind of miraculously, when I was 23, my mom had a surgery to replace her knee, and she entered into a pretty intensive sort of therapy and rehab, and she strengthened herself and her body, and she actually lifted up into a new space. She still had pain at times, she still had fatigue at times, but it was not like what it was. And She was able to go out and get a full-time job, and I just watched all this vitality come back into her, not only into her body, but into her spirit. She had energy to do the things that she wanted to do, to grow in the ways that she wanted to grow, go to her spiritual things, go to the movies, garden, be out with people. And it was so beautiful. And I got this really golden opportunity to get to know her almost like a new person in so many ways as an adult. And we just grew closer, and our bond grew stronger. And kind of parallel with that, I was entering my late 20s, early 30s. I kind of got to a place within myself of really taking responsibility for just all of the pain that I was still carrying around my childhood, whatever that was. I kind of felt a little bit like it's my responsibility to live into the person of who I want to be, so what am I going to do with all of that? And so I had conversations with my mom about my childhood, about some of the difficult parts, and she was so cool about it. So cool in understanding just what my place was. She didn't get defensive, she acknowledged it, and we just had a really beautiful, honest conversation about what it was like for both of us, and that ended up bringing us closer together, even more. And as I guess luck would have it, in my early 30s, I got a back injury of my own. And all of a sudden, for 2 years, I felt what it was like to have chronic pain, to get up and try and go to work every day and come home and just feel like I gave everything I had just to make it through today. Lay down on my bed and rest for the rest of the night. I couldn't do much. I didn't know if I'd be able to have children. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to go to a concert again. I just didn't know what I would be able to do in that 2 years. I felt that fear of this never ending. And luckily I was able to move through that, but I just got a small taste. 2 years, small taste of what that is to have that chronic pain and chronic fatigue that comes along with it. And also during this time, I just was in a period of spiritual awakening and really trying to come into my own as a spiritual presence and who is the adult that I want to be. And part of that was that I wanted to centralize compassion in all of my relationships. That was central to me. How can I just be as compassionate as possible in all of my relations, and what does that look like? So about 10 years ago, kind of almost inexplicably, my mom's chronic pain and chronic fatigue started to come back. And I witnessed that slowly creep over her life as her energy levels diminished and she couldn't work anymore. I was having mobility issues as a result of it. Then COVID happened, all this isolation. And it felt to me, in that moment, like as the stuff was coming back, there was a part of me where I felt all of that old fix-it energy rushing back in. It was like my cup just filled all the way back up with all that old energy that didn't have anywhere to go the last time. And here I am in that same sense of frustrated. I can't fix this. Right? And, I just kind of took a moment and I just said, I'm not the same person that I was then. She's not the same person that she was. We're in different spaces. We're in a whole new thing. And what does it mean to approach this with more compassion, from a more compassionate place? And what ended up coming was just this kind of emergence of a beginner's mind. The compassion led to this emergence of a beginner's mind within me where I just took that cup with all that old tea in it, and I just poured it out. I just poured that out and I just put it back down on the tray, right? And I allowed the hard reality of what was happening to fill that cup and to sit there and just be with my mom sharing that tea, not resisting it, not trying to wish it away, but just to be there until I could, again, no fixing, no bargaining, just accepting. And I've found that this posture of receiving allows us to be more connected instead of it being a divider between us, instead of there being energy between us. And so I was still super close with my mom. I visit her once a week, and every single time I see her, I ask her how her week was. Good days, bad days. Some days she can barely get out of bed. My mom lives alone, so she spends a lot of this time where she's in pain and fatigue alone. And all I can do is listen, and I acknowledge her. I acknowledge that she's had a difficult week. I just sit in that beginner's mind space of receiving her as if I'm hearing it for the first time. Because even with my small little taste, I remember every week hurt, whether I had said it to somebody or not, right? And I always get this sense that, well, and after she tells me about it, I always take a moment to just acknowledge it and say, that sounds really difficult, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I always notice this little lightning that happens in her face when I say that. A little bit of a smile, a little bit of a just thank you. Just thank you for acknowledging that. So I just want to conclude on two notes. First, I just want to acknowledge my mom. And I want to acknowledge all the folks in here who deal with chronic pain and chronic fatigue in their lives. And I want to thank you for showing up as you do, as you can. It's so difficult to face it day in, day out. And so I just want to acknowledge you. Can we get a round of applause for all those people, for our loved ones? And thank you. And I'll end also on it with an invitation. So I don't know about you all, but I don't just have one cup of tea. I kind of have like a tray, like sort of on my shoulder all the time, and it's got all different cups, sizes. They're full of tons of all this old tea. So I would just invite you in the name of compassion to take one or two of those cups and just pour it out. Pour out that old tea, put it back down on the tray, and allow that relationship or that situation to just unfold and receive it with a beginner's mind as if you're allowing it to pour fresh tea into the cup. And I invite you to drink tea with that situation from there, and to just see what connection can come